In today's video, we're diving into the countries where the commercial sex industry is either legal, rampant, or both. We'll explore the places where paying for sex is just another part of everyday life, while also looking at the ethical debates that come with it. Is it empowerment or exploitation? Is legalizing prostitution the solution, or does it only make things worse? You might already have some guesses about which countries we're talking about, but you'll be surprised to learn just how many of them are hotbeds for this kind of business. From the red light districts of Amsterdam to the bustling streets of Bangkok, we'll expose the truth behind the glamour and neon lights. But before we dive in, take a moment to subscribe to our channel for more videos about global issues and human rights. And while you're here, drop a comment. What's your take on the commercial sex industry? Is it something that should be legalized, or are there better ways to protect the vulnerable? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Now, let's kick things off with a country that's practically synonymous with sex tourism: Thailand. When you think of Thailand, you might picture stunning beaches, temples, and bustling street markets. But for many tourists, there's a different kind of attraction: Thailand's notorious sex industry. Thailand has become a global hotspot for sex tourism, where paying for sexual services is seen as just another part of the country's bustling tourist experience. While technically illegal, prostitution in Thailand is openly practiced and widely tolerated, making it one of the world's most prominent destinations for those seeking paid sexual encounters. One of the most famous areas associated with this trade is Pattaya, a city known for its go-go bars, massage parlors, and neon-lit nightlife. Here, the lines between legal and illegal are blurry, and it's often the case that authorities turn a blind eye to the thriving sex trade, as long as it doesn't get out of hand. And while there's no official count, estimates suggest that hundreds of thousands of women and men work in the commercial sex industry in Thailand. What drives this industry is a complex mix of poverty, opportunity, and exploitation. Many of the women who enter this trade come from poor, rural areas of Thailand. In some cases, women and girls are trafficked or coerced into the industry, while others enter voluntarily, seeing it as a way to support their families. It's a dark reality that beneath the glossy tourism brochures, many women face abuse and exploitation in exchange for survival. Thailand's sex trade isn't just about local women, though. The country is also a hotspot for international sex trafficking, with women from neighboring countries like Cambodia and Myanmar often being trafficked into Thailand's brothels. Despite some efforts to crack down on this illegal trade, traffickers continue to find ways to exploit the system, using corruption and bribery to keep their operations running smoothly. While prostitution is illegal in Thailand, the lack of enforcement and the deeply ingrained nature of the trade means that it continues to thrive. There have been ongoing debates about whether the government should fully legalize and regulate prostitution, but many argue that doing so would only further institutionalize the exploitation of women. On the flip side, some believe regulation could provide sex workers with more protection and basic rights. But for now, Thailand remains caught between the shadow of its sex trade and the efforts to clean up its image. If you find this topic surprising or thought-provoking, take a second to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. And tell us in the comments, should countries like Thailand legalize prostitution, or would that only make things worse? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Netherlands. The Netherlands is often celebrated for its progressive laws and liberal approach to many social issues, including prostitution. The country's red light district in Amsterdam is world famous, not just for the neon-lit windows, but for the fact that sex work here is fully legal and regulated. The idea is simple: if you legalize and regulate prostitution, you can better protect the workers and reduce crime. But is it really that simple? In theory, legalized prostitution in the Netherlands is supposed to ensure that sex workers have rights, access to healthcare, and a safer working environment. They pay taxes, have access to unions, and can report abuse without fear of being criminalized. For many, this seems like the perfect solution. Sex work becomes a legitimate profession, and sex workers get the legal protection they deserve. However, in reality, it's a bit more complicated. While some sex workers in the red light district choose this profession voluntarily, others are victims of trafficking and exploitation. Human trafficking remains a significant issue in the Netherlands, with women from poorer countries being lured in with false promises of legitimate work, only to end up trapped in the sex trade. the government has struggled to fully eliminate this darker side of the industry, despite its regulations. Moreover, critics argue that the legalization of prostitution has made the Netherlands a magnet for sex tourism, which can attract shady characters and foster environments where exploitation becomes easier to hide. The red light district, while seemingly a haven for regulated sex work, is also a place where illicit activities often fly under the radar, including underage sex work and trafficking. On the other hand, advocates of the system argue that decriminalization and legalization offer better alternatives than criminalization, which often pushes sex work underground, making it far more dangerous for the women involved. The Dutch government continues to grapple with how best to balance the rights of sex workers with the need to combat trafficking and exploitation. So, while the Netherlands may seem like a success story for legalizing prostitution, it's far from perfect. The debate continues over whether legalizing the industry is truly the answer, or if it only serves to further institutionalize the commodification of women's bodies. Now let's head on over to their neighbors, Germany. Germany is often seen as a model of efficiency, but when it comes to legalized prostitution, things are more complicated than they might first appear. In 2002, Germany fully legalized prostitution with the idea that regulation would improve working conditions for sex workers, reduce human trafficking, and provide a safer environment for everyone involved. But like many grand plans, the reality turned out to be a bit messier. On paper, legalizing prostitution seems like a win for workers' rights. Sex workers can legally work in brothels, receive health benefits, and pay taxes just like any other profession. However, in practice, the situation on the ground has been less ideal. While some sex workers report feeling safer and more secure under the legalized system, many others find themselves trapped in a cycle of exploitation. In fact, Germany has become home to a booming sex tourism industry, with people traveling from all over the world to take advantage of the country's liberal laws. One of the biggest controversies surrounding Germany's legal sex industry is the rise of so-called mega brothels. These massive establishments offer services at rock-bottom prices, and critics argue that they turn the sex trade into a volume-driven business where exploitation is easy to hide behind closed doors. While the legal framework is intended to protect workers, the reality is that many of them, particularly migrant women, face poor working conditions, coercion, and exploitation at the hands of brothel owners and traffickers. Germany's government has made efforts to combat trafficking and improve protections for sex workers. In 2017, the country introduced new laws requiring brothel owners to obtain a license, and sex workers must now register with authorities. But critics argue that these regulations have done little to address the deeper problems of exploitation within the industry. Despite these challenges, there are those who believe that legalization is still a better option than pushing prostitution underground. They argue that in countries where sex work is criminalized, workers face even greater dangers, including violence and exploitation, because they have no legal protections. But in Germany, the debate over whether legalizing prostitution has really helped or hurt sex workers rages on. The question of whether legalization reduces or increases exploitation is at the heart of this debate. Supporters of legalization believe it provides a safer environment and empowers workers to control their own lives. On the other hand, critics argue that it creates an environment where exploitation can flourish under the guise of legality. So, what do you think? Should prostitution be fully legalized, or does that only lead to more harm? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into controversial global issues. Cambodia. Cambodia's sex industry isn't just about adult prostitution. It has a far darker side. The country has gained an unfortunate reputation as a hotspot for child prostitution and human trafficking. Cambodia's weak law enforcement, coupled with extreme poverty, has made it a haven for exploitative practices that target some of the most vulnerable members of society: children. One of the main drivers behind Cambodia's illicit sex trade is poverty. Many families, struggling to make ends meet, are forced to make desperate choices. In some cases, parents are coerced or tricked into selling their children, believing that they will receive better opportunities for work or education, only to later find out that their children have been trafficked into the sex trade. Once caught in this vicious cycle, these children many of them underage girls, are trapped in a life of exploitation. Phnom Penh, the capital, is one of the epicenters of this issue, with tourists coming from all over the world to seek out cheap and often illegal sexual services. Despite efforts by the government to crack down on sex tourism, Cambodia remains a popular destination for those looking to exploit vulnerable individuals. While many sex workers in Cambodia are adults, a disturbingly high percentage are minors who have been coerced into the trade. In response to international pressure, the Cambodian government has introduced stricter laws aimed at combating child prostitution and human trafficking. Organizations and NGOs working on the ground have also been vital in rescuing victims and providing them with support and rehabilitation. However, corruption within the police force and the judicial system often hampers progress, allowing traffickers and corrupt officials to evade justice. Despite these challenges, there are glimmers of hope. Increased awareness, both domestically and internationally, has led to more resources being poured into anti-trafficking efforts. Local organizations are working tirelessly to protect at-risk children and dismantle trafficking networks, while also advocating for better laws and stronger enforcement. The harsh reality is that child exploitation in Cambodia remains a persistent problem, fueled by corruption, poverty, and demand from sex tourists. And while progress is being made, it's a slow and difficult battle. The vulnerable continue to fall through the cracks, and the cycle of exploitation remains hard to break. Let's head on over to the next country, Brazil. In Brazil, prostitution is legal, but the situation is far from straightforward. The Brazilian government allows sex work, but it doesn't regulate it. This means that while it's legal to sell sexual services, many aspects of the industry operate in a legal gray area, leaving sex workers vulnerable to exploitation, violence, and poor working conditions. In Brazil, the commercial sex industry often exists in the shadows, far from the protections that legalization might imply. Brazil is a country with stark contrasts, and nowhere is this more apparent than in its sex industry. While some sex workers in wealthier cities like Rio de Janeiro and Sao Paulo can earn decent wages in regulated environments, many others, especially in poorer, more rural areas, end up trapped in a life of prostitution out of economic desperation. Poverty drives many women into the industry, where they often face abuse, exploitation, and lack of access to healthcare or legal protection. The rise of sex tourism in Brazil has further complicated the issue. Foreign tourists, especially from Europe and North America, flock to cities like Rio and Salvador during major events like Carnival and the World Cup, looking to indulge in the country's legalized sex industry. While this tourism injects money into local economies, it also creates an environment where exploitation becomes easier to hide. The influx of tourists often leads to a rise in human trafficking and the exploitation of minors, particularly during these high-traffic seasons. Despite prostitution being legal, brothels and pimping are illegal, which creates a paradox for sex workers. Many are forced to work in unsafe conditions, without the ability to rely on legal establishments or protections that come with full regulation. The government's reluctance to fully regulate the industry leaves many women at the mercy of unscrupulous individuals who take advantage of the legal loopholes. Brazil has made efforts to combat human trafficking, especially in the run-up to large events like the 2014 World Cup and the 2016 Olympic Games. However, the deeply ingrained issues of poverty, corruption, and social inequality make it difficult to tackle the root causes of exploitation in the country. While some argue that fully regulating the industry would offer better protections for workers, others believe that Brazil's complex social issues, especially poverty, need to be addressed before any meaningful changes can be made to improve the lives of sex workers. For now, Brazil remains a country where prostitution is legal, but largely unprotected, leaving those involved at the mercy of their circumstances. If you found this interesting, let us know your thoughts in the comments. Should countries like Brazil fully regulate their sex industries, or are there deeper issues that need to be resolved first? And while you're here, don't forget to like and subscribe for more insights into global issues. United States. In the United States, the approach to prostitution is a patchwork of conflicting laws that vary dramatically from state to state. In some parts of the country, sex work is outright illegal, while in others, such as Nevada, It's legalized and regulated. This creates a complex dynamic where the legal and illegal worlds of prostitution exist side by side, often leading to confusion, exploitation, and gray areas where the law struggles to keep up. Let's start with Nevada, the only state where prostitution is legal in certain counties. In Nevada's rural areas, brothels operate under strict regulations, with sex workers required to undergo regular health screenings, register with local authorities, and follow specific legal guidelines. The aim is to provide a safe environment for sex workers while keeping the industry away from more populated areas. However, prostitution remains illegal in major cities like Las Vegas and Reno, creating a unique situation where tourists and locals may not always know the legal boundaries. While the brothels of Nevada are often portrayed as examples of legalized sex work done right, the reality is more complicated. Legal brothels make up a small fraction of the sex industry in the United States, with the vast majority of prostitution happening illegally. In cities like New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago, underground sex work is rampant with little oversight or protection for the workers involved. This illegal industry is also where much of the exploitation and human trafficking occurs. The criminalization of prostitution in most of the country has led to significant issues for sex workers. Many are forced to operate in unsafe environments, with no access to health services or legal protection. In some cases, sex workers are arrested and prosecuted, while the buyers and traffickers escape without punishment. This unequal application of the law has led to widespread calls for decriminalization, which advocates argue would reduce the stigma, protect workers, and allow for better regulation. On the other hand, opponents of decriminalization fear that it would lead to an increase in exploitation and trafficking, much like the situation in countries where prostitution is legal. The United States faces an ongoing debate about how to address the complexities of sex work, whether to follow a model like Sweden, where buying sex is illegal but selling it is not, or to fully legalize and regulate the industry as seen in parts of Europe. For now, the U.S. remains a country where sex work exists in a legal gray area. The vast differences between state laws and federal regulations mean that sex workers are often left vulnerable, and the lack of a consistent approach only fuels the ongoing debate. Do you think the United States should fully legalize prostitution or continue its current patchwork approach? Or what do you think about this country and their treatment? Japan. In Japan, the commercial sex industry operates in a legal gray area, much like in the United States. While prostitution, defined as vaginal intercourse in exchange for money, is technically illegal, other forms of sexual services are legal, and the industry thrives under a variety of euphemisms and establishments, such as hostess clubs and soaplands. These unique venues offer paid companionship and services that, while not explicitly violating the law, often skirt the boundaries of what is considered legal. Hostess clubs are perhaps one of the most famous aspects of Japan's sex industry. Here, customers pay for the company of attractive women, or men, who serve drinks, engage in flirtatious conversation, and provide emotional companionship. While these clubs do not explicitly offer sexual services, they often act as a gateway to paid encounters outside the club. For many hostesses, these venues offer an opportunity to earn significant income, but they also come with high expectations regarding appearance and behavior, and the work can be emotionally taxing. Then there's soaplands, a type of establishment where customers pay for private baths with attendants who provide body-to-body services. While these venues avoid directly offering prostitution, according to the legal definition, the services provided are highly intimate and often involve activities that blur the line between legal and illegal. Soaplands are especially popular in cities like Tokyo and Osaka, where they cater to locals and tourists alike. The Japanese sex industry operates under a complex system of social norms and unspoken rules. Despite its legality, the industry remains somewhat hidden, and there's a cultural stigma attached to sex work. Many workers face discrimination, both socially and professionally, if their involvement in the industry is discovered. However, the industry continues to flourish, supported by a mix of local demand and international tourism. One of the darker aspects of Japan's sex industry is the exploitation of trafficked women. While Japan has stringent laws against trafficking, the sheer size of the sex industry makes it a hotbed for illegal activities. including the coercion of foreign women into the trade. Women from Southeast Asia, in particular, are often brought to Japan under false pretenses and forced to work in the sex industry to repay supposed debts. Culturally, Japan's attitudes towards sex work are complex. On the one hand, there's a long history of geisha and entertainment venues, which are culturally accepted forms of paid companionship. On the other hand, there's an ongoing debate about whether Japan's relaxed approach to regulating the sex industry allows for too much exploitation. So, what do you think? Is Japan's semi-legal approach to the sex industry creating more opportunities for exploitation, or does it provide necessary protections? Share your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more in-depth discussions about controversial topics like this one. We've taken a journey through some of the most controversial and complex corners of the world's commercial sex industry, from the bustling streets of Thailand to the regulated yet controversial red light district of Amsterdam, and from the legalized brothels of Nevada to the gray areas of Japan's hostess clubs. One thing is clear: this is an industry filled with contradictions, exploitation, and tough ethical questions. On one hand, advocates argue that legalization offers a pathway to safety and rights for workers, reducing harm and ensuring that those involved can access healthcare and legal protections. On the other hand, many believe that legalization, or even partial decriminalization, can make it easier for exploitation and trafficking to thrive under the guise of legality. So, where does the balance lie? Should countries fully embrace legalization, or is there a better way to protect the vulnerable without turning sex work into an institutionalized part of society? This debate is far from over, and there are no easy answers. What's clear is that addressing the root causes, poverty, corruption, and inequality, is critical to creating real, long-term change. If you found this video insightful, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future content. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this difficult topic, so drop a comment below and let us know where you stand. Should prostitution be legalized, or do we need stricter laws to prevent exploitation? Let's keep the conversation going. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay curious and informed.